Welcome to Jackrabbit Journal. The FCS playoffs continue with 3 teams from the Missouri Valley still in the mix now, Hank. Northern Iowa, North Dakota State, and Illinois State still in play. I know you don't care, but the Jackrabbits, meanwhile, knocked out in the first round of the playoffs by Montana. But another successful season in the books for SDSU. Successful or not? What do you think?
Yeah, it was successful. 8 wins is something you can go out on the road and talk to the kids about. 4 straight year into the playoffs. That's nothing to shake a stick at. Something to be proud of. Something you can pitch to kids. Say, hey, you want to come be a part of a successful program? This is what we're doing. But fell short of a couple of goals, that's for sure. The goal is always to be a conference champion. The goal is always to get a top 8 seed moving forward with the recent success they've had. And they didn't achieve those. And so, yes, it was a success. Could it have been more successful? Right. Absolutely.
All right, instead of the traditional game-by-game recap to the season, we're going to go back and look at the questions that we all had at the start of the season, take a look at what everybody thought was going to happen, and then how it actually played out this year. Would it be impossible to replace Zach Zenner? Turns out, yeah, almost. Could Jake Winicki be as good as he was last year? Could the Jackrabbit defense be one of the best in the Missouri Valley? And we'll look at how some of the numbers compare from last year to this year. The first question we all had, Hank, was at running back. And Zach Zenner had racked up 6,000 yards in the last 3 seasons. He was gone. We had hoped that the committee of Brady Mangarelli, Isaac Wallace, and Kyle Paris would be able to carry the load and make up those yards. How'd they do it?
They did a good job. Those guys ran hard week in and week out, no matter who was the lead dog that week, and it varied week in and week out. But those are some big shoes to fill, to say the least. Yeah. And they ran admirably, but it's tough when you lose an All-American. There's not too many programs in the country that can lose a guy like Zach Zenner and then automatically pick right back up where he left off the following year.
The Jacks ran for a total of 1,688 yards this season, about 36 yards per game less than a year ago, and probably the biggest difference was in the big plays. The longest run by a running back this year was a 57-yarder by Brady Mangarelli. Zenner had 4 that were longer than that just last year, and he had a ton of those in his career. That was one of the big differences, not a lot of big plays in the run game.
Right, and the explosive plays was something that was really missing all throughout the year. There are a number of factors, I think, that play into that, aside from just not having number 31 back there. These guys, they took their shots throughout the season, were nicked up here and there, each of them really. A couple of them had difficult times holding on to the ball at times, so they'd take a back seat, and then the next guy up type of deal. And really, we'll talk about more about this in a little bit, but the struggles on the offensive line were really a big part of that, and something that certainly needs to be addressed moving forward.
All right, we'll get to that. Mangarelli ends up as the leading rusher on the season. He'll be a junior next year. Kyle Paris will be back as a senior. Isaac Wallace will be a sophomore. Sam Zenner, Zach's brother, redshirted this year. He might be in the mix next year as well at running back. And as you said, the fat guys up front, the offensive line, big part of the run game. When they were on, it was kind of fun to watch. A couple of examples of how it was supposed to be, blowing people out on a touchdown run here against Western Illinois. Another one coming up against Missouri State that was beautiful, but you just wanted more nastiness, you kept saying, out of the offensive line.
Absolutely. It felt like this group took a step back as far as the attitude that we've grown accustomed to coming from this unit, really over the last 10 years. If you were playing SDSU and game planning for them on the defensive side of the ball, you would understand that these guys are here to run the football, and they're going to do so with a certain amount of edge from the 5 boys up front. And we just didn't see that consistently throughout 2015.
Jacks will have to rebuild the offensive line. Jacob Onosorgi, Charlie Harmon, the only starters coming back. We think that Nick Carr will be back on the offensive line next year. Matt Clark, number 73, you see in some of these highlights, was a true freshman this year. He was good as a backup at right guard, but the Jacks are going to have to replace 3 starters on that offensive line. When we come back, Jake Winicki killing people with the rack, the run after catch, yak, yards after catch, whatever you want to call it. A look at some of his awesome meandering trips through opposing secondaries when we come back.
Jackrabbit Journal on Midco Sports Network is presented by Dakota Land Honda.
Welcome back. Taking a look back at the Jackrabbit football season. And one of the other big preseason questions everybody had, Hank, was can Jake Wieneke do it again? He was the Missouri Valley Freshman of the Year last year, 73 catches, 1,400 yards, 16 touchdowns. And we thought if he could get close, even close to doing that again, it would be amazing. And he did.
Yeah, and it was amazing, really, when you look at how things were so different from last year. You don't have a dominant run game. You don't have an all-conference wide receiver on the other side of you. Question marks at the quarterback position. The odds were stacked against him. Defense is now game planning specifically for you, and he still got it done. Heck of a year for the young man.
Yeah, put it that way, it is amazing. We will look at some of the numbers for Wieneke in a minute, but he is going to obliterate every receiving record at South Dakota State. One of the most exciting plays in any game this year was Wieneke breaking loose for a big play like the one in the game against Robert Morris. And after that Robert Morris game, he was injured for the last 9 games of the year. But the only thing better than that maybe was Wieneke hauling in a pass, shaking off a couple of tackles, and then weaving his way through traffic. He had one of those against Northern Iowa. And then he would do the same thing and take it for a touchdown. He had one of those against Illinois State. This was his longest of the season at 74 yards. And then another catch and slash and burn at the Dakota Dome. He did not have a touchdown in the game against the Coyotes, but he had 6 catches for 180 yards. He had one late in the game to set up the Jackrabbits' go-ahead touchdown against USD. And here are the numbers for Wieneke through 2 seasons. 145 catches. That is 6th all-time. 31 more will put him in 2nd place. He still needs 81 to go ahead of Josh Davis, your buddy, who was there about 10 years ago. So maybe another year plus, and he will get to Josh Davis's record there. 2,876 yards. That is 3rd all-time. He only needs 746 next season to break the record there. 27 touchdowns is already 2nd on the all-time list. 32 is the record held by Jeff Tiefenthaler. And Wieneke's on pace for 54 if you want to look at it that way. The FCS record is 58. And he will be back, of course, but the Jacks lose Trevor Wesley and Brandon Andrews and Matt Raymond at wide receiver. Connor Landberg will be back. Alex Wilde, maybe, kid from Brandon Valley in South Dakota, will step in next year with Jake Wieneke. And a couple other guys you've been keeping an eye on at wide receiver.
Absolutely. No, there's some definite young talent that this program is fired up about. The future crop of playmakers is very promising. And in talking to the coaching staff, they're real excited about the potential these guys have and are looking forward to them doing what needs to be done, number 1, in the classroom, and then number 2 on the practice field to make sure that they're ready to go for 2016.
Adam Anderson is one name I think you threw out.
You bet.
Marquise Lewis.
Absolutely.
Guys to watch maybe at wide receiver next year. So Wieneke is getting his, whether it has been Austin Sumner or Zach Lujan or Taryn Christian throwing the football, and that gets us to the quarterback question now, Hank. Anything can happen, of course, but we assume that Zach Lujan and Taryn Christian are going to be back next year. Is this a problem, or is this a great problem, so to speak, for the coaching staff to have? Is it a dilemma, or is it a great problem?
It's a dilemma. It's a problem. It's a great problem to have. Yeah, 2 players that can get it done on any given Saturday at the quarterback position is a luxury to have. With that being said, ideally, you're able to have one of those guys step out beyond the other and say, hey, I'm the guy. This is my team, and I'm ready to go for this next fall. And these guys, they're ready to roll with me. How that's going to play out over the next 12 months, we're going to find out. But there's a lot of balls to be thrown, a lot of weights to be lifted, and a lot of film to be watched.
It might take about 9 months before we know, right? In the first 4 games of the season, including the North Dakota State game, Zach Lujan was on fire. He had 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions in those first 4 games. He finishes up with 14 touchdowns, 6 interceptions this year. Without the injury, he was on his way to a big season. There was probably going to be no question who was going to be the guy, but Lujan gets hurt in the North Dakota State game. Taryn Christian makes a big splash in his debut against Indiana State. 221 yards passing, that beautiful touchdown to Wieneke. 99 yards and a touchdown on the ground in that game for Christian. And he throws for 307 yards and 2 touchdowns against Illinois State. The Jacks beat the number 2 team in the country, but remember, Lujan comes into that game late in the first half, throws a touchdown to Wieneke. We get to the next week. Christian starts at South Dakota, struggles. Lujan comes in, leads the Jacks to a comeback win. So they both have great strengths. We're most likely, as you said, going to have to go through spring and fall and get up to the opener next year before we know how this is going to shake out.
Yep, it's going to take time, and a lot could happen. You don't know which one of these guys could get hurt along the way. There's a lot of time, a lot of development that's going to take place over the next 12 months. It's got to be an exciting opportunity for this coaching staff to really know that they've got 2 guys that they're going to help continue to get better throughout this offseason. And I'm sure they'll be pumped to see them roll it out in the spring ball and then into fall and see which one, if either of them, is able to finally take the reins full on.
All right, one last thing on the offense, the tight ends. We wondered back in September if they would pick up production this year, and they certainly did. Cam Jones and Dallas Goddard had 13 catches, no touchdowns last year. This year they combined for 50 catches and 3 touchdowns. Jones was finally mostly healthy this year. He had 24 grabs. The Jacks will lose him to graduation. Dallas Goddard, love this kid. He's going to be a junior next season. He earned first-team All-Missouri Valley Conference honors this year. Well, up next, how about the Jackrabbit defense? Did T.J. Lally finish up an outstanding career? Yes. Did the Jacks allow fewer points than anybody in the conference? Yes. And did they pick up the sack numbers this season? We'll check that out next.
Jackrabbit Journal on Midco Sports Network is presented by Dakota Land Honda.
Welcome back. Back in September, we sat with Jackrabbit defensive coordinator Clint Brown. He said flat out, we need more sacks. We need to get after the quarterback more. We need to be better on the defensive line in 2015. Were they?
Oh, without a doubt, this unit improved tremendously from 2014 to 2015. You can see it in the numbers, but it was visible on every single play, regardless of whether there was a sack that they were accumulating. I was glad to see these guys really step up and really take some steps from the year prior, because it was absolutely necessary for the success of this defense, for this front four in particular, to have a much better year, and they did just that. Well done, fellas.
Jacks had 21 sacks this season. That is 6 more than last year. Of that total, they had 16 in the 8 conference games, 2 a game. That was tied for 4th in the conference with North Dakota State. Cole Langer led them with 4.5 sacks. Jared Bloom had 4. J.R. Plody had 4. So yes, the sack numbers were better this year. Langer and Bloom will be back. So will Kellen Solik. He blocked 2 kicks this year. He had that interception at Missouri State that he grabbed right off of his face mask and returned it for a couple of yards. So he is back. Shane Gottlob, Chase Kern, Blake Witzel, who was a true freshman this year, should all be back on the defensive front for the Jackrabbits as well. Some big losses, though, Hank. T.J. Lally at linebacker, and the cornerbacks, Butler and Forsyth, both gone. That's huge losses.
Yes, it is. Those are 3 very good football players on the defensive side. Not just playmakers, but they were leaders of this football team for the last couple of years. And so, yeah, you hate to see guys like that move on, but that's a part of college football. So they move on. There's 3 open spots, vital spots in this defense that young guys got to step up and find a way to win those jobs.
All right, the Jacks did give up fewer points in Missouri Valley Conference games than anybody else this year. They allowed 15.8 points per game, gave up just 15 touchdowns in the 8 conference games. And T.J. Lally ends up starting every game in his 4 years as a Jackrabbit, ends up as the leading tackler this year like he did last year, and he was either first or second in tackles all 4 seasons for T.J. Lally. So huge cleats to fill there, but Jesse Bobbitt will be back, Nick Farina. The next 6 guys on the tackle list this year are all back on defense for the Jackrabbits next season. We got the plays of the year coming up a little bit later, but up next, a look at the schedule for next season and one big thing to look forward to on offense and defense for the Jackrabbits in 2016.
Jackrabbit Journal on Midco Sports Network is presented by Dakota Land Honda.
Welcome back. The SDSU football team will open the season next year in Fort Worth, Texas, taking on Texas Christian, the Horned Frogs. TCU is 10-2 right now this year. They finished 11th in the final playoff rankings this year. That'll be a nice little contest to get it going. The first home game at the new Dana J. Dykehouse Stadium will be on September 10th against Drake. That's followed by Cal Poly, and the Jacks will have their bye week like they did this year, before the first conference game, which will be against Western Illinois on October 1st. Indiana State drops off the schedule for next year. Southern Illinois is back on the schedule. The Jacks will get USD at home, but road games next year at North Dakota State and Illinois State and Northern Iowa, the 3 teams that are still left in the FCS playoffs from the Missouri Valley. By the way, we did snap one last picture in the Coughlin Alumni Stadium press box before they tore it down, along with the fly strip and the extra lumber and the extra office equipment that they kept in there. Going to be nice to be in the new stadium once we get to next season. Attendance, by the way, Hank, was up almost 2,000 per game from the year before. They had 1,963 per average per game more this season. So that was good news as well.
Absolutely. Moving in the right direction, getting ready for the new stadium.
All right, one big thing that could make or break the Jackrabbits on offense next season.
For me, it's the offensive line. Got some holes to fill, got to plug them as soon as possible, and get that entire unit focused and back on track.
All right, what about on defense, one group that needs to be heavily replaced?
Certainly the cornerbacks. You got to look at those two positions. Safety, they're locked down. Defensive line is going to be tough. Linebackers, yeah, you lost TJ, but they're relatively deep at that position. Got to focus on finding the right guys to fill those positions on the outside.
All right, from the Dallas Brown interception in the first game at Kansas to the Dallas Goddard fourth down touchdown catch at Montana, we've got the plays of the year on offense and defense coming up when we come back.
Jackrabbit Journal on Midco Sports Network is presented by Dakota Land Honda.
Welcome back to Jack Journal, and my thanks to Hank McCall. Nice work this season, my man. Big thanks to Coach Stiegelmeier and the coaches and the players. We will be back on January 6th with basketball and wrestling here on Jackrabbit Journal, and we leave you with the top 10 defensive and top 10 offensive plays of the year in SDSU football.
First to the quarterback keeper. A 28-yard run, good for a first down.